It seems you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Jo Swinson says she wants to be the next Prime Minister of the UK. Nigel Farage isn't even standing to be an MP. They're both leaders of their party, but which one's right? Welcome to Bertie's Guide. In this episode, we're going to take a look at how the mainstream media has reacted to Jo Swinson wanting to become the next Prime Minister and Nigel Farage not even standing as an MP while he leads the Brexit party in the UK general election.
Speaking of you forming the next government, here's one of your leaflets. Here, I'll just show it up for the camera to see it. It says, Jo Swinson, Britain's next Prime Minister. When did you indulge in fantasy politics?
I'm standing as a candidate to be Prime Minister, Andrew.
No one stands as a candidate to be Prime Minister. You're standing as a candidate in Easton Barton.
I'm standing as the leader of the Liberal Democrats, and you're right, we have a parliamentary democracy system, and the leader of the party who secures the most MPs or a majority of MPs becomes Prime Minister.
Believe it or not, I do know how it works.
So that is the sense in which I'm a candidate to be Prime Minister.
But you know, I know, our viewers know, you're not going to be the next Prime Minister.
So there we go again. It's the mainstream media, yeah? The Andrew Neil show. Andrew Neil is the oracle that knows everything. Once again, the mainstream media that failed to call out all recent elections, putting the idea in people's heads that Jo Swinson can't become the next Prime Minister. Now, I don't really care whether you like Jo Swinson or not. You cannot tell people or her that she can't be the next Prime Minister. Now, I appreciate the polar side to that is that Nigel Farage thinks it's unrealistic that he would be the next Prime Minister, hence his reason not to stand as an MP and to put all his efforts into campaigning for the Brexit party. But you see how the mainstream media is trying to mould the narrative to what fits comfortably within the world that they understand. So on this, I think Jo Swinson's got a point.
Well, hang on a second, Andrew. We're about to have a general election where millions of people out there are going to cast their votes.
We know that.
And exactly. And it's not up to you to tell them what they can and can't choose.
No, you can't play. I'm not telling them. Yeah. I'm not telling them. I'm saying that from everything we know about politics, our viewers, you as well, every commentator knows you're not the next Prime Minister, and it's unrealistic for you to say so.
I cannot disagree with you more on this, Andrew. Right? We are in a very volatile political situation. Plenty of people said they didn't think Jeremy Corbyn would become leader of the Labour Party. Plenty of people said they didn't think Donald Trump would ever become president of the United States. Plenty of people said that they didn't think that Brexit would ever happen. We have seen many unprecedented political results in recent years.
So would you rule out global domination?
I'm standing...
I mean, you're probably as good a chance of that as being Prime Minister.
Andrew Neil is out of order. He's being completely disingenuous, and frankly, he's an utter disgrace to journalism and broadcasting. It's there, you can see it and watch it.
Well, he's tried and failed 7 times to become an MP. Yesterday, Nigel Farage said he won't be adding an 8th attempt at this election.
The Brexit Party leader says he thinks he'll help the cause of Brexit better by campaigning all over the country, starting today when his party unveils 600 candidates for Parliament. Why won't you be one of them? Very good morning to you.
Because I can't do both. You know, we're not the Conservative Party or the Labour Party.
Every other party leader will do both.
How long have the Conservatives been around? I think 200 years. The Brexit Party, 6 months. We don't have any safe seats. So, if I fight a seat, that's where I've got to be. I've got a much more important job to do than that. The first is to get around the country and to say to Labour voters, you have been completely let down and had all the promises broken that were made to you. And the second, which is equally important, is to explain to people that when Boris Johnson says his deal will get Brexit done, it will do no such thing.
OK, but just on this one issue about you not standing.
Well, I can't do both, that's the point.
Well, except that we've just established that other party leaders do both. So does it not show some political cowardice that if you've lost 7 times, what you're actually really scared of
Susanna,
is
I've
losing
only
an
had
8th
one.
time?
I've only had
If you were
one.
convinced about your
I've
political
only had
power,
one
you
realistic
would stand.
chance at winning a seat. All the previous times I stood as a means of getting a message out and building up a political movement. I did have a serious go in 2015. It's the one time I had a go at winning a seat. I finished up spending way too much of my time in that constituency and not out around the country. I'm not making that mistake again. And you know what? Actually, if I can help get enough Brexit Party MPs into Parliament, I'll have done my job.
Okay.
So it's a fairly predictable cheap shot to say that Nigel Farage isn't standing as an MP because he couldn't bear the thought of losing again after standing 7 times. To be honest, what Nigel Farage has achieved, whether you like him or whether you don't, in getting the EU referendum in the first place, in helping campaign and winning the EU referendum vote to leave, and having the guts to come back and start a brand new political party after everything he's already done, and in 6 months to achieve the results they have in the European elections, and then to come and fight the UK general election and to stand MPs in 600 of the 650 seats that are available. He's absolutely right. It's the party machine that the Conservatives have, Labour have, the Lib Dems have, is, doesn't exist with the Brexit Party. So it's a little bit of a cheap shot to say, why aren't you standing? I appreciate at first glance, it does seem like he's sort of shirking that responsibility. But let's see what happens over the next few weeks as to whether his decision is right or not.
Page of the Telegraph here. Farage could ruin UK's hope of Brexit. This is the house paper for the Brexiteers.
For the Conservative Party.
Right.
So let's be clear what's happening here. The Tory tribe is coming together because there's an election. Forget policy, forget Brexit, just get the tribe together. Let's go back to politics as usual. And that's what they're saying.
Except
but look, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Here's the key question, really. You say that Boris Johnson's deal is as bad as Theresa
It's not Brexit.
Right. So what should that deal be including which has any realistic chance of getting through Parliament, which would satisfy you?
Right. So Boris...
Phrase that question very specifically.
No, I've got that. So Boris inherited a very difficult position, all right? A new EU treaty that Mrs May had negotiated that was an abject surrender, but a parliament that really was never going to vote for Brexit. The point of general elections is it's when you press the reset button, it's when you start again. There are going to be a different group of men and women in this next parliament. And with a new party manifesto is a chance to drop what was there before and start again.
whole point
and I
about
can't
this-
tell you how disappointed I am that Boris Johnson has picked up Mrs May's treaty, put some new wrapping on it, and suddenly says it's a great new
The
deal.
compromise in these situations, we've been going at this over 3 years, right? The country's sick and tired of
We've
it.
barely started if
Well, I
this
know,
goes through.
I realise that. But we've been going through this process for 3 agonising years.
Yeah.
It's ripped the country apart, as
The
you
next,
know.
the,
right?
next, the next 3 will be worse.
Right.
That's the point I'm making.
Right, but there's a reality check here, isn't there? This election has a way of fixing stuff, either way, potentially.
I hope so.
Or it can make it more of a mess.
Well, I'd hope so, but this doesn't fix
But
it.
what people on the right of the argument are saying, on the Conservative side, is, look, Nigel, this is all fine. You can run your 600 candidates. You can cause merry hell. But actually, what you may achieve here in your craven desire for a pure Brexit, as hard as you can get it, is you might trigger Jeremy Corbyn becoming
Why?
Prime Minister.
Why?
Because he might win.
Why?
Because you'll take votes away from the Conservatives.
Were you guys around in 2015?
You will split the Brexit vote.
I find this amazing.
And either Labour and Corbyn or
I
the Lib Dems
find
in some
it
seats
amazing.
could come up the middle.
Well, this is their argument. This is their argument to you.
Well, I tell you what I find amazing. That you guys and people writing these newspapers seem to have very short memories. Back in 2015, I had the same headlines, right? I led UKIP into the 2015 general election. I had all the same stuff, all the same arguments, the Tory tribe screaming and shouting, don't take our votes. What happened in 2015? The UKIP vote took more votes from Labour than it did from the Conservatives. Cameron wouldn't have even got a majority without the UKIP.
But
There are 5 million.
Look.
Hang on. There are 5 million people out there who voted Brexit and voted for Jeremy
There
Corbyn
are
in
also
2017.
millions who voted...
And they are a huge
Okay.
target vote.
But there are millions who...
What you see here is how the mainstream media simply cannot deal with anything that's outside the normal narrative. That's why they've absolutely failed to call all of these elections recently. The last general election, the US election, the EU referendum, they called them all wrong because they don't listen. That's actually the main thing. They don't listen. There are people out there crying out on the streets, telling the government, we're fed up, this is what we want. The same in America. Middle America was completely ignored by the mainstream media. And then they went, oh, what happened? I was actually out in the States in LA just shortly before Trump got elected. And when I came back, I wasn't really hugely surprised because I spoke to just general people. And that was in LA, that's sort of in the bubble. But the mainstream media, they all they do is talk to each other, and this is why they manage to call things so badly. And the problem is people listening to the mainstream media, they're just going to get this message that this party can't win, or this is impossible, and all this can't happen. It's very simple. People vote for a particular party or for a particular person, they get elected.
Brexit.
How, if he puts in a manifesto, how does he deliver no deal when Parliament has already said it's not going to let it happen?
You have no idea who's going to be in the next Parliament, do you?
I do know this probably...
You've no idea.
No, but I do know you have...
Piers, the reason we have elections is to give people fresh choices and to start again.
You're taking a big bet.
See, there it is again. I quite like Piers Morgan, and he's very good at playing devil's advocate to create the argument, to create the discussion. But in this case, you see he can't get his head around the fact that when the UK election happens this time is that you can have a whole new bunch of MPs in Parliament. It's completely different. We had a Remainer Parliament last time, which is what caused the problem. And this time round, but you can see they're trying to drive the narrative that things will be like this. They're trying to second guess what they think they know will happen. Like Farage or not, he's sticking to his guns. He knows his business. He knows what this is all about. He's read the treaty. He's worked and lived in the European Union Parliament for the last 20 years.